Either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. That's the pitch. If you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. Pittsburgh Steelers, if you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin on my back.
Listen, this entire time, I haven't felt like I owed anybody some sort of decision at any point. This is my life.
The Pittsburgh Steelers' 2024 season ended in a very familiar fashion for all fans. They would do just enough to make it into the wild card and then would lose immediately in the wild card. They finished their season on a 5-game losing streak after starting out the season on pretty decent footing. They opened the season with Justin Fields as their starter and finished it with Russell Wilson. And going into the offseason, this team had a lot of questions that they needed to answer, and they got to work right away on trying to improve their team, making one of the first big blockbuster trades of the offseason, trading a second-round pick and a late-round pick swap to the Seattle Seahawks in return for DK Metcalf. All of a sudden, their wide receiver depth problems were solved. They had DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the roster. The next question was who was going to play quarterback for this team. As free agency began, they had to choose between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields before they waited too long and allowed Justin Fields to sign with the New York Jets. Eventually, Russell Wilson decided to move on as well and sign with the New York Giants. In the meantime, the Steelers only really had one option remaining, and that's hoping that a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers would choose to sign with them and be their quarterback for next season. And to be honest, at the time it seemed quite attractive, and it seemed like a perfect fit. Sure, the Pittsburgh Steelers don't have the greatest offensive line in the NFL, but having the opportunity to throw the football to Pat Freiermuth and George Pickens and DK Metcalf, and working with an offensive mind that Aaron Rodgers seems to get along with and Arthur Smith seemed too good for him to pass up. But Rodgers wouldn't sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers right away. I mean, he still hasn't signed with the Steelers right now. Originally, he was waiting on the Minnesota Vikings, who recently had a lot of success with Sam Darnold under center, who eventually moved on to the Seattle Seahawks to sign a 3-year, $100 million contract, and we're planning on starting JJ McCarthy at quarterback this upcoming season. But Aaron Rodgers was trying to convince them to have JJ McCarthy sit down for one more season because the Minnesota Vikings are quite possibly the most complete team in the NFL, both offensively and defensively. I mean, if you take a look at this roster following all of their offseason acquisitions, there isn't a single flaw with this team. And I'm talking about wide receiver depth. I'm talking about their front seven. I'm talking about their defensive backs. I'm even talking about their backup halfback that they traded for this past offseason. Their coaching staff, everything with the Minnesota Vikings seems to be perfect. I can't blame Aaron Rodgers for doing his absolute best to follow in Brett Favre's footsteps.
With Aaron Rodgers, we don't fully know. We can only surmise. Rodgers had his way. I believe that he would like to sign with the Minnesota Vikings. Do I think it's likely? No. But I just don't know that it's practical for the Vikings. This is a team that invested the 10th overall pick last year in JJ McCarthy. Minnesota come around at some point in time and say, you know what? JJ's slow to come back from his torn meniscus last year. That could they then revisit Aaron Rodgers and say, you know what? This guy's going to give us a chance. That is it happening today or anytime soon? It doesn't sound that way.
And it gets even crazier because throughout all of this, throughout him trying to convince the Minnesota Vikings to give him an opportunity, the Pittsburgh Steelers were just sitting there waiting on him. Aaron Rodgers would have a throwing session with DK Metcalf towards the end of March, and he would also meet with the Pittsburgh Steelers at the same time, but he wouldn't give them a commitment. Back in March, we were told that this could drag all the way to the NFL draft.
I don't get the sense he's in a hurry at all. I really don't. And there's no deadline for him to be. You're going to do everything you can to let him know, hey, whenever you make a decision, we got you. He doesn't have to decide by any time. There's no actual deadline. The next point is, do you draft someone? And that's a month or so away. So, like, all of us would kind of like this done sooner rather than later. In the sense Rodgers in any hurry at all. And, like, could it go all the way to the draft like it did 2 years ago?
He even had Cam Hayward coming out and saying that he doesn't like the fact that Aaron Rodgers is doing this.
I ain't doing that or darkness retreat. I don't need any of that crap. Like, either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. That's the pitch. If you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. Pittsburgh Steelers, if you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin on my back.
Rodgers mentioned 4 years ago that he likes Pittsburgh.
So I've been around a lot of Pittsburgh people over the years. I've loved my time with all of them. But I have a ton of respect for Mike. I think he's a fantastic coach. I love the way that he leads. I love the way he talks after the games. It's like he's somebody that the players love playing for him.
I mean, it gets even crazier. The Pittsburgh Steelers even said that there was no deadline for Aaron Rodgers to sign with them. Mike Tomlin said that, not to my knowledge. I don't know what we've approached it from a deadline perspective. Certainly, as I mentioned, you'd like to have settled circumstances. But deadlines don't often bring that to a head. The Pittsburgh Steelers owner, Art Rooney, was very optimistic about a month ago that Aaron Rodgers was heading in their direction, and that he keeps hearing that Rodgers is heading in their direction. But Mike Tomlin, I guess, tried to play chicken as well, saying that he has full confidence in Mason Rudolph being the team's starting QB next season. That's why we brought him back. I'm comfortable with that. We've been there before, and he's very capable. I think it's just a bizarre situation because Mina Kimes says it best here.
Let's start here. I don't really understand their decision-making process. They are backed into a corner with Aaron Rodgers. This is a good football team. This is not a rebuilding team. They were in the playoffs last year.
So originally I assumed that, like a normal human being, Aaron Rodgers was going to make his decision in the beginning of NFL free agency. Maybe he was going to take his time and wait until all the dust settled and take a look at all the teams once their rosters are complete and then make his decision then. But he didn't do that either. So then I thought maybe, just maybe, he's waiting until the NFL draft. How are teams going to look post NFL draft? Are the Steelers going to potentially take a quarterback that could compete with him in the NFL draft? Well, the Steelers didn't. As a matter of fact, the Steelers NFL draft was one of the most interesting drafts I've ever seen. Don't get me wrong, they did need some help at defensive tackle because they were getting old at that position, so they selected Derek Harmon in the first round. They didn't have a second round pick because of the DK Metcalf trade, but in the third round, they really needed a new running back because Najee Harris walked and signed with the Los Angeles Chargers, so they selected Caleb Johnson. In the fourth round, they still had Shedeur Sanders on the board, but they selected Jack Sawyer over him. And then they finally addressed the quarterback position in the sixth round when they selected Will Howard. But this was all the more head scratching because you had a first round talent available to you in the fourth round and you don't have a quarterback. And if you do get a quarterback, it's probably going to be an older quarterback. I don't understand why the Steelers didn't select Shedeur Sanders in the fourth round. I mean, we were all confused that they didn't select him in the first round or in the third round. So the assumption was that Aaron Rodgers was going to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before the NFL draft, Rodgers would appear on the Pat McAfee show to announce that he hasn't made a decision yet.
Listen, this entire time, I haven't felt like I owed anybody some sort of decision at any point. This is my life. Things are different now. My life is different. My personal life is different. And I've been upfront with him about that and said, listen, if you need to move on, if you need to do something, by all means, like nothing but love and respect. There's been no deadline, and I've talked to Mike T many times.
And that's where we currently stand. As of mid-May, Aaron Rodgers still hasn't made a decision. As of mid-May, the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go into the new NFL season with one of the saddest quarterback battles I think we've ever seen. Mason Rudolph versus Will Howard. And it's just absurd because at the very minimum, there could have been continuity or there could have been upside. There's multiple ways that the Pittsburgh Steelers could have had a young quarterback to, at the very minimum, sit back and develop behind whoever was going to be their starting QB, or you actually give Justin Fields a legitimate shot this year. And don't get me wrong, historically, whenever it comes to transactions, the Steelers really hit the nail on the head, unless if it's the quarterback position. But at the same time, you have to admit, there is this question of what the hell are you guys doing? I mean, you don't draft a quarterback in the NFL draft. You finally get wide receiver depth, which is incredible, but then you trade your leading wide receiver to the Dallas Cowboys for a third round pick, which, don't get me wrong, historically, the Pittsburgh Steelers always get these types of deals right. I mentioned it in my George Pickens trade video, and they even made a graphic here on Football Forever. Martavis Bryant was traded in 2018 for behavioral issues. AB was traded in 2019 for behavioral issues. Chase Claypool was traded in 2022 for behavioral issues. Deontay Johnson in 2024, and now George Pickens in 2025. So historically, they know what they're doing whenever they make such a trade. Again, if you take a look at the statistics with the Steelers and without the Steelers, AB averaged 86.2 yards per game with the Steelers and 67.8 after with the Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Mike Wallace had 64.2 with the Steelers and then 49.8 after when he signed with the Miami Dolphins and then became a journeyman. Santonio Holmes had 63.9 with the Steelers and then 42.2 after with the New York Jets and was a journeyman. Juju had 61.2 with the Steelers and then 34.7 with the Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. We still have yet to see the deal with George Pickens. Deontay Johnson's 3 teams was all in the same year this past year. Martavis Bryant had 53.3 with the Steelers and 3.3 with the Raiders. And we made a separate video on this, but Chase Claypool's is the most tragic. He had 52.4 yards per game with the Steelers and 11.4 with the Miami Dolphins and the Chicago Bears. He honestly did that to himself. I mean, Ryan Clark says it best himself, but he might be a little biased because he played for Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin consistently says he doesn't run from coaching. He doesn't run from teaching. George Pickens, with that immense amount of talent, can no longer exist in that locker room. It's going to be difficult for him to exist anywhere. And we're looking at a Jerry Jones who doesn't make moves, now saying at this price, I have to make this move if I want to make my team. How do you incorporate him into the locker room? And we heard Shadi talk recently about the way he moved Dak Prescott and Micah Parsons' lockers next to one another and making sure that George Pickens gets the football as well, because it seems that he could tear down a locker room.
But that's not my issue here. I'm not here trying to scrutinize the Pittsburgh Steelers for trading George Pickens for a third-round pick, because at the very end of the day, if you know that you're not going to re-sign him to a big contract once his contract expires, then you should trade him for a third-round pick. There's no question about it. My question is, if you knew that you were going to trade George Pickens, and if you had this huge gaping hole at the quarterback position, why not address it in the NFL draft? When they selected Derek Harmon with the 21st pick, they still had Matthew Golden on the board that went to the Green Bay Packers 2 picks later. You would have had him on a very cheap deal for 5 years. That's the perfect amount of money to pay a wide receiver too. I'm not here trying to criticize the decisions that the Pittsburgh Steelers are making. Rather, I'm just trying to point out the fact that a lot of their decisions don't make a lot of sense thus far, especially if Aaron Rodgers decides to hold off and not sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. For all you know, he may make his decision sooner rather than later, and he wants the NFL news cycle to be relatively dead when he does make that decision. But let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about all this, man? If you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, how do you feel about the way your offseason went so far? Aside from that, I don't know if you heard, but the Steelers traded George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. We have a completely separate video on that. I'm going to leave it in the end screen to meet you guys there. We also have a video on how Chase Claypool ruined his life, and I'm going to leave that in the end screen as well. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.